This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Zoom and Carasoft. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, a four-pronged plan for better government buying. The roadblocks come into focus for improving customer experience. And Get Real, Get Better is more than a slogan at Fleet Forces Command. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. The White House says its Better Contracting initiative will save more than $10 billion a year. It includes four prongs to achieve that goal. Christine Harada is Senior Advisor at the Office of Federal Procurement Policy at the Office of Management and Budget. Christine, welcome. It's great to see you. Four prongs here, as I said. How did you determine that those were the four things you wanted to focus on among all the possibilities that I imagine existed for BCI?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on today to talk about the super exciting initiative, or at least we're very excited about it. It really stems from the Fiscal Responsibility Act and the tight fiscal environment that we find ourselves in. And so in order to ensure that we are delivering better for the American people and mission agencies, we wanted to make sure that we are best able to harness the taxpayer dollars as far as it can possibly go. So the four prongs of the Better Contracting Initiative were really developed from what are the biggest levers that we can use to ensure that we are harnessing our taxpayer dollars, getting a better return for our buck.
Prong one is leveraging data across federal agencies to get lower prices and better terms. You're going to use data to do that, a new centralized data management strategy. How will you execute that strategy, and who do you want using that data that you're going to collect and exchange?
Absolutely. So as you may know, and as your audience likely is very familiar, we have billions, if not tens and hundreds of billions of data points across the entirety of the federal government. And this really is building on the approach that we've had over the last 8 years or so to ensure that the federal government is taking on a much more enterprise-wide approach to how we buy things and serve our missions. The data is going to be coming largely from the variety of contract writing systems and payment processing systems that we've got throughout the entirety of the federal government. We have developed both a what we call a high definition data framework, and we'll also be supporting that with an environment, a technical architecture as well to help integrate all that data together. And the intended audience really truly is for the acquisition workforce to ensure that we are leveraging to the greatest possibility that we can the data that we've got. So whether it be prices, terms and conditions, products and services, what contract vehicles can agency use in order to be able to access that so that they can serve their agency customers as efficiently and effectively as they can.
One of your colleagues at OFPP, Joni Newhart, was on the FedGov Today podcast recently talking about educating the workforce about how to use data for exactly the purposes that you just described. What's your sense of how the agencies are doing at bringing their workforces up to speed regarding the data that's available for them for this kind of contracting?
Yes, so absolutely, we have a frontline focus on acquisition workforce because, again, they are the pointy end of the spear. They're the folks who are interacting with all the contractors and the agency customers on a day-to-day basis, and that's not just lip service. We take that very seriously. We work very closely with the senior leadership at the agencies to ensure that they have, they're developing and implementing a robust human capital program. There's a number of training development opportunities that we have now implemented across the entirety of the federal enterprise. We've also just recently introduced parity between the civilian agencies and DoD, the Department of Defense, for the acquisition workforce certifications to now have parity. So it helps to encourage greater career development and other learning opportunities throughout the entirety of the federal enterprise. We want to make sure that we are piloting and developing and deploying those tools that are most useful for the acquisition workforce. And so we do that through working groups, we test pilot out tools, et cetera, and make sure that we're incorporating their feedback as we go along, because again, we don't want to build a system if it's not going to serve them.
Another potential benefit of that parity, the certification parity, sounds like could be that it will be easier for someone to move from agency to agency and germinate different ideas across the enterprise of the government. Is that a fair read?
Yes, absolutely. There are a number of agencies that do phenomenal work in a variety of their different sectors, which totally makes sense given the agency missions. And I think that there is a ton of great best practice sharing, lessons learned that can be leveraged from one agency to another.
The second prong of BCI is negotiating common enterprise-wide software licenses. This is something the government has tried in different forms in the past. past. What is it about this particular effort that you're going to make that you think you'll be able to get it this time?
Absolutely. So there's, I would call it, I think, three big things that have really led us up to this point. The first is what we just talked about, the better access to and usage of data from across the entirety of the federal enterprise. Secondly is a much more unified approach to how the federal government approaches cybersecurity writ large. What are the specific terms that we want? What are the frameworks and standards that we all ought to be implementing? And that disparity between what I would consider the national security agencies and civilian agencies is really not there anymore. And certainly last but not least, the administrative efficiencies associated with the benefits of having a much more enterprise-wide approach. I think that we have culturally come to a really good point where throughout the entirety of the federal government, we're in a better place to be able to accept that.
Prong number 3 is saving money and avoiding waste by getting contract requirements right the first time. And you write in this one about improving the requirements writing process. What will those improvements look like? And who will you be working with to improve those requirements writing?
So we're getting the requirements right the first time makes it easier for everybody, whether it be the agency, the programs, and the contractors themselves. We are leveraging a process that has long existed, both at the Department of Defense and at the General Services Administrations, in conducting peer reviews and workshops, requirements workshops. As a former engineer, many of these agencies have a tradition of design reviews, whether it be preliminary design reviews, critical design reviews, and so we're taking similar practices to that, applying it to the requirements workshops so that we can better design, but not only the requirements of the service or product that the agency is seeking to acquire, but also what procurement method, what kinds of down select methodologies is this appropriate for a little bit more innovative approach versus maybe a little bit more of a classic RFP approach.
You're housing that at GSA. This says GSA will continue to sponsor a series of facilitated requirements development and acquisition planning workshops. That's something they're doing already, it sounds like, and it sounds like you're going to try to turbocharge that, spread it wider. Is that?
Yes, that's correct. So over the past 3 years, GSA has helped us out with about 30 of these workshops across 15 different agencies, and we've seen just remarkable transformations in the overall requirements documents.
Number 4 is getting better value from sole source and other high-risk contracts. And you shout out an organization in the Navy here, the Price Fighters. Tell me about the Price Fighters and why that's the right model that it sounds like you would like to see spread across other defense agencies in the civilian sector too.
Yes, it's a great team of folks, extraordinarily knowledgeable and an expert in how to think about costing, especially for their particular environment. Of course, very high risk acquisition system or acquisitions themselves, as well as somewhat a lot of sole source situations as well, where there aren't as many market players. And so in those kinds of situations, having a team like the Price Fighters, who are very well versed in both the technical needs and the specs of whatever system it is that they're looking to acquire, as well as the overall agency needs, combined with having that economic and market knowledge has been extraordinarily valuable. This team, relatively smaller team in the grand scheme of things, but they have saved us hundreds of millions of dollars, and I think that we're looking to leverage and multiply that going forward across the entirety of the federal government.
You tipped me before we went on the air about the Sustainable Products and Services Procurement Rule that's just out this week in honor of Earth Week. What's included in that, and why is it important, Christine?
Yes, we're very excited about this one. This is about 10 years in the making, and we are now pointing federal agencies towards better leveraging and maximizing the use of EPA required standards and eco labels, et cetera, and further in the pursuit of ensuring that we are buying as cleanly as we possibly can.
What will the deliverables be for organizations across government agencies and sub-agencies in order to meet the spirit of that?
So you will see in a lot more of the RFPs, as for both the products and the services that we buy, requirements around ensuring that they are following all the EPA standards, eco labels, and you should see an uptick in the number of buying clean type efforts.
Christine Harada, great to have you on the program. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me.
You can read more about the Better Contracting Initiative on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the roadblocks come into focus for improving customer experience. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. Here's CyberMac's Chief Information Security Officer Aaron Shaw from Innovation in Government at HIMSS, presented by Carasoft.
I was recently speaking with one of the CISOs of a regional healthcare, and they're very focused on availability, which I, from my perspective, coming from a DoD background, really hadn't considered and appreciated that. But it makes sense, right? Availability, keep the system up, right? Shipping blood was one of the things we kind of focused around. Their blood bank. They're like, hey, the system, we have to keep it up, right? I have to move blood, right? It's a just-in-time delivery. We have to bring it there. Makes perfect sense. So sometimes the incentives are aligned for more availability than confidentiality. Obviously, they want to protect everything, but Sun Tzu said, if you try and protect everything against everything, you protect nothing.
For more, go to innovationingov.com. Welcome back. The President's management agenda includes a priority pillar for customer experience. Federal technology leaders say their agencies are leaning on them to improve the infrastructures that deliver those experiences. Matt Mandrgoc is head of U.S. Public Sector for Zoom. Matt, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. What are you seeing agencies dealing with? What do they have to do in order to deliver on the infrastructure needs that I just talked about to fulfill the vision of the PMA for customer experience?
Francis, one of the biggest challenges we're seeing across the federal government right now are challenges around legacy systems and forced technologies that don't scale, are hard to use, or have implementation or additional cost associated with that. It actually hampers innovation and actually productivity and drives up a higher total cost of ownership.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing customers who are actually want to go out and implement what does it mean to the customer and employee experience, but also digital inclusivity. Some examples I'll give you. We had one high impact service provider who actually implemented in a low bandwidth environment, a major program getting out to all those individuals and sharing with them the program that impacted their livelihood. With that, it was very impactful around the fact that they were have digital inclusivity around that low bandwidth environment. We had another customer who implemented a virtual recruiting platform of ours, and they were able to recruit a number of people all over the country. We're able to take those individuals, strong candidates, implement them into a breakout room, walk them through what it would be to onboard. There's a great example of where they were able to actually have employees, bring in the government employees of the future. And then we also have an agency who went out and actually did self-provisioning. So what they did was they took a manual process and they went across and they took our Zoom for Government platform for phone, implemented it into a ServiceNow environment where they're able to self-provision. In this automation and integration, it actually helped the employee experience onboarding people quicker, but also took away an IT burden that they were faced with on that side.
What are some of the challenges that you see agencies having grafting that kind of technology into a legacy environment like you alluded to at the beginning of this conversation?
Francis, they really have to take a look at the why. Why are they implementing this technology? So many times when I mention legacy and forced technology, people put things in place, but there's no rhyme or reason why they're putting that in place just to replace something. They have to step back into the why. What is the employee experience? What is the customer experience they're working with? And in that, they're able to actually create the next level of what that experience is going to look like for their customers or their employees.
It sounds like strategy is as important as tactics from the way that you're describing it. Thinking about what you want to get to is as important, or maybe more important, than the steps that one needs to take to get there.
Correct.
Fair read on my part?
Exactly. A like for like is just not the way it goes, because it doesn't really add into anything that you're going to do to take it to the next level for the customer experience. As you know, from the presidential mandate, how do you create a higher level experience for those individuals? And if you look at this at another level, accessibility is such a huge component of what they're doing across the government. So accessibility, being able to have such things as we've done in our platform, being able to have language interpretation, sign language, translation captions in courts, all of these things around accessibility within these platforms to create the customer experience, not only for the customer, but also for employees as well.
And you mentioned employees, and that's where I wanted to go next. A lot of discussion in the federal government now about employee experience and customer experience and how closely they're aligned, how one influences the other. Is there a difference in the way that you've seen agencies approach employee experience versus customer experience? And should there be a difference in the way that somebody approaches both of those two issues?
Yeah, there really should never be a difference. If you think about that, there's so many times people go, well, we use this internally, but we're going to use this for everyone else because we want to look good. Well, why should those employees not have the same experience that a customer has? So we have to look at, as a government, where we have to implement different types of solutions that actually can support not only the customer experience, but give employees that same experience. Again, impacts and hampers productivity and innovation with those employees. And again, everybody's looking at that next level of where they have productivity to the next level. How do we create and pull the technologies in to help these employees be productive, whether they're in a hybrid environment, anywhere they are?
We have about 30 seconds left. What is the best way for somebody to track this to make sure that they're making the gains that they want to make in the areas that you've talked about with me today, Matt?
You have to look at surveys. It's not just a matter of what you put out in technology. You have to survey the employees. You have to survey customers, get feedback from them, understand what they do, how they do their job. As I mentioned earlier on, it's the why. Why are you doing something? How are you doing this? And then be able to take those whys and how they do things and implement the technology, which will allow them to actually take it to the next level. And then, again, it's important because you're recruiting the next level of government employees for the future. You want to provide that same instance that you would in an industry as well.
Matt, it's great to have you in the program. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me, Francis.
You can read more about improving customer experience in government on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, Get Real, Get Better is more than a slogan at Fleet Forces Command. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. Here's Fortanic's Vice President and General Manager Patrick Conti from Innovation in Government at HIMSS, presented by Carasoft.
True Zero Trust requires that you actually protect the memory of that destination server. And so one of the things this is one of the transformative things that can happen in the industry is using something called confidential computing to protect that memory so that the memory is a place that your data and your application can go, where now you can manipulate it fully protected without the bad guys being able to steal the data, which is super expensive, or the formula, which may be just as expensive.
For more, go to innovationingov.com. Welcome back. Get Real, Get Better is a challenge the commander of Navy Fleet Forces Command has issued to industry. Admiral Daryl Caudle says that concept will drive culture change. At Sea Air Space recently, he tells me Get Real, Get Better will help his command hold its industry partners and itself accountable.
You know, as a nuclear-trained operator brought up in a Rickover world, it's a natural fit to me to do the things that are the fundamental tenets of Get Real, Get Better, which are transparency, accountability, what we call embracing the red, meaning that if something is off plan, we acknowledge it, develop creative solutions to get back on plan and relentlessly execute that. And then if we can't do something at our level, we raise those barriers to a level that can help us with solutions.
You were talking about that in reference to the relationship the Navy has with industry. You're here at an event where there's plenty of industry. What are you saying to those folks as you're going around the room here and talking about the solutions that you're looking for?
It's a great opportunity for me to, one, thank them for the partnership that we have with them. And as partners, we have a responsibility, in my mind, to hold each other accountable. And so we contract services and product from them, and they have a responsibility to deliver that. If that's not happening, we have a collective responsibility to deep dive into what's going on there. And it may be something in the supply chain, it may be a workforce problem, it may be something where the Navy has not set very good requirements. But at the end of the day, we have to be on the same page and actually get this stuff going again at pace and scale. We're in a critical decade, so we cannot waste time on things not executing to plan.
When you talked about Get Real, Get Better, you alluded to momentum that you see in a positive direction regarding that. What continues that momentum, and what signs do you see that momentum exists? How do you perpetuate it?
It's, I think, the coming together in periodic times where we do what I call intermediate progress reviews with the right stakeholders, with the right authorities to make the changes necessary to get programs back on plan. Mm-hmm. So instead of letting those drift too far off, where we're backed into a corner where there is no solution other than just acknowledge the delay, we're just constantly course correcting en route. And that's tackling small little challenges that we both have, either in the Navy or with our defense industrial partners. Those things have to be brought to an awareness level so that leaders like me can actually help.
What do you expect to see the Navy do to try to drive momentum in that direction? And what would you like to see industry do to participate in that partnership in that way?
Well, I think the Navy owes industry clear and crisp and effective requirements, so that everybody's on the same page of what we're asking for, and that solution solves a key operational problem. We have to have good contracting strategy so that the risk is shared between the Navy and the contractor in which we're going into business with, so that if it gets off plan, we have accountable measures to get everyone back on the same page again. I think that's crucial, and often it's not well done in my experience. Again, I've mentioned that it's got to be a periodic review process, so that when we see these things going off plan, that we get back on with I think small changes instead of when it gets really big. The Navy, I think, should signal properly through the acquisition and budgeting process that we are in this for the long game. So multi-year procurement is something that every industry partner wants. They're investing in a workforce, they're investing in long lead time material acquisition, and they've got to know that we're not going to, have 1 year and then depart the pattern. I think that's crucial. And the last thing I would tell you is there are quality assurance checks. There's testing requirements. There's pieces where the Navy program managers are there at the site where these things are being done. If that equipment is antiquated or it's not working properly, there's not enough test stands, whatever that might look like, the Navy has a responsibility that we're not in the critical path of the production.
A lot of discussion at this conference about capacity, especially regarding shipbuilding. You're speaking recently also about boosting surge capacity. What do you mean by that? In what areas do you want to see that capacity grow? And how do you expect either your side or the industry side to go about doing this?
So it's a fantastic question. We have about 300 ships. About 100 of those daily are deployed worldwide. About 100 of those are up on the blocks or in some kind of depot maintenance. Well, this gives me 100 that I can actually try to get more readiness out of. So I'm working very hard at Fleet Forces to define what combat surge ready means, so that in the process of generating that force, from the time it comes out of its deep maintenance to the time it deploys, there's an intermediary state in which I could actually, if called upon, deploy that force because I've certified it for at least a combat acceptable level of risk. And so by building that into the normal force generation process, I give Admiral Franchetti more degrees of freedom and more ability to solve combatant commander problems if called upon with the force I have that's not yet deployed. So that work that we're doing is through what we call in the Global Maritime Response Plan. It's how I envision that the Navy goes to battle stations, and it's a holistic view of warfare owners, communities of practice, the SysComs who own the requirements. What is it they need to do to move at scale and pace if we actually have to transition from competition to crisis to conflict?
More players on the field is the term that Admiral Franchetti likes to use.
And they have to be ready.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I wanted to go, is what is in your power and what is in industry's power. Because, for example, shipbuilding strikes me, you have those 100 ships that are in port being worked on, being refreshed. What's the capacity look like in the ability to do that?
Well, you're right. So if I want a bigger Navy today, I could get a bigger Navy right away by delivering ships that are in maintenance period on time. So any overrun chips away at my size of my operational Navy. The shipbuilding, new construction on time has to be there because that's delivering more players to the field. So both of those are critical. So the industrial base has a vital role and doing that to give Admiral Franchetti the additional players that now I can train, organize, and equip to be ready to do high-end combat. So getting those out on time is so vital to that.
We just have a couple of minutes left. One area that with more players on the field will be necessary is the Arctic.
Yes.
What is your view of the Navy's role in the Arctic? A lot of discussion here about what the Coast Guard's doing there. What about the Navy, sir?
I just had the great opportunity to go up for our Ice Camp Whale Arctic operations up there, where 2 nuclear-powered submarines got to do some time up there with academic, with warfighting, with industry, industry to make sure that we walk that battle space and are very, very comfortable operating in that important part of the world. As that Arctic ice cap gets smaller and smaller as time goes on, we cannot allow Russia basically to dominate that space. And so we have to be up there, so we have to have enhanced presence, we have to have great partnerships up there, and we have to have the capabilities to feel like we can operate in that extremely harsh environment with competency and confidence.
I've tracked the Polar Icebreaker program that the Coast Guard has run and is trying to replace the Polar Star. What's the Navy's what's the hardware status look like up there, and what would be ideal for you to have?
Well, the submarine force, of course. Aviation, of course, under and over the polar ice cap is a natural fit. But what you're going to see is our surface Navy and what we call the Arctic is really operations above the Arctic Circle. Mm-hmm. So much of that is just open ocean, just at high latitudes. So communication systems, foul weather gear, the equipment's designed to operate with that type of water injection temperatures, and the ability to actually work with the partners in the high north region are key to that. And so you're seeing with each deployment cycle that we're doing with our carrier strike groups, more and more, my good friend Admiral Munch is deploying some amount of that force into the Arctic region.
You can read more about the Navy in the Arctic and all over the world on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. Dive deep into the latest advancements in maritime technology and defense. Watch Innovation in Government from Sea Air Space, April 30th at 8:30 p.m. on WJLA 24/7 News. You'll get exclusive insights from leaders at the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard as they discuss breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and digital innovations. Don't miss this unique perspective on the future of maritime defense and technology. Tuesday evening, April 30th at 8:30 only on WJLA 24/7 News, sponsored by Carasoft. Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, one of the biggest government industry collaborations of the year is coming May 19th through 21st. ACT-IAC will host the Emerging Technology and Innovation Conference at the Hyatt Regency Chesapeake Bay in Cambridge, Maryland. The agenda is already loaded with government speakers. You can read more about the lineup and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. The FedGov Today podcast this week features my exclusive conversation with the Federal Chief Information Officer, Claire Martirana, and the National Cyber Director, Harry Coker, talking about their partnership, how they work on cyber issues with civilian agencies, and how they collaborate with defense and intel agencies. You can listen and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts, and it's always available on demand at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30 with the Deputy Director of OPM, Rob Shriver. He'll take over as Acting Director in May when Kieran Ahuja steps down. And Lamont Yarborough will be here too. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching FedGov Today. Have a great week.